Let's bring in Doug Turnbull now. Always enjoy talking with Doug, all things traffic, and I want to talk about these Waymo cars out there because I see them all over in Atlanta. Right now they're on the city streets. Eventually they're going to be on the interstates, right?
Yeah, for sure. I'm actually thinking, and that sounds scarier because of higher speeds, I actually think that's a better environment for them because you're not stopping for school buses on interstates. You're not dealing with people crossing the street or with shopping carts or backing out of parking spaces. And maybe that's why, Alphabet, the company that owns Google, owns Waymo also. And maybe that's why they beta tested them on the city streets, because that's where you have to do the most learning around all of these different situations. So as there was outrage is fit to call it, or, there was a little bit of public outrage anyway, and viral videos about Waymo cars not only running school bus stops in Atlanta, but also in Austin, which have school bus cameras, and that's another city, one of about the 10 cities or so that have Waymos, and then freezing up in intersections. I think at one point they drove through a closed part of a homecoming route at Georgia Tech.
Drove through a crime scene.
Which,
Not here, but it was caught on camera elsewhere.
There's a lot of people that go, wait a second. As they Google what a Waymo is and use AI to look up the answer.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, but I don't want robots taking this over. And so what I wanted to do is take a question to a Georgia Tech professor that our special assignments team actually recommended to me, whom they had talked about Waymos to before. And I'd written an editorial in my Gridlock Guy column. Basically, should Waymos be held to a higher standard than humans? Because I had learned during our back-to-school reporting, actually my first package here at 11 Alive, was 9,000 or so Georgia drivers run school bus stops every day.
Wow.
And is that a higher or lesser percentage than what Waymos do? And right now there's so few Waymos. The Waymos, it's probably a higher percentage, but people are getting Waymo videos by filming and driving at the same time, which is illegal. Okay, I just want to hold their phone.
It sounds like humans are running the stop signs Waymo than the Waymos.
That's it, they do, and they certainly, as the Waymos learn, are gonna. No, that's what we need to be saying. Okay, but I think as those cars continue to learn how to account for the different variables, they're going to improve. Are human drivers going to improve? I'm not so sure. So that's what I wanted to bring to this Georgia Tech professor. Srinivas Pita is his name. He has studied connected car technology basically for almost 40 years, since 1989.
Okay.
So he has seen back when they couldn't even measure real-time traffic data. They just had to collect data over time, all right, all the way until now, where data is superfluous and things are everywhere. So that's what he has done. And I asked him the same question: should Waymos be held to a higher standard than humans? And his answer is, well, the whole point of them is that they're supposed to be higher standard, but people's outrage is more at them because they trust them less than they trust other human drivers.
I'm a data guy. I'm going to look at the numbers before I decide whether it's safe for me to get in one. And I was looking at the numbers this morning, and I could only find 2 reported fatalities involving a Waymo. And in both of those cases, Doug, it was not the Waymo at fault. It was another human driver who crashed into the car. That's what the data says, but it is early, and we still need a lot more of it. By the way, it's Waymo releasing this data, so take that with a grain of salt, perhaps. But when do you expect we will finally have some concrete numbers out there to be able to say, all right, this is something safe for me and my family?
Well, total numbers are not the ones you want to look at. It's really percentages.
Okay.
Right? So if you had 2 fatalities, well, that's almost nothing compared to the 30 or 40,000 there are a year in the U.S., roughly, on the roadways. But it's 2 out of how many Waymos? Or how do you say 2 out of how many Waymos, have been in a crash? Well, that's probably a higher percentage than the average driver.
Okay.
So that's you really want to look at percentages there. But one thing that Pita, which is again the last name of the Georgia Tech professor I spoke to, said is what they have noticed in modeling and everything overall is these vehicles have less percentage of crashes per vehicle miles traveled, which is a number of the traffic data people look at. When the total number of miles traveled per vehicle, that they have a less percentage of wrecks. So, and the other thing that I found from this, really the last kind of new finding, or maybe new to some people, is these vehicles operate better with other autonomous vehicles. And the higher percentages there are of AVs, which is what autonomous vehicles are, the better the safety is going to be, because there are less uncontrollable variables because all of these AVs are talking to each other.
Interesting. And how neat that it's happening in our backyard. Atlanta, one of the few test cities? Are there a handful at this point?
I think we're up to 10 now, and don't have me rattle them off just
Right.
now, but there have been several out west like Phoenix and San Francisco, Austin, Texas, Atlanta. I think Nashville's been on the list.
Okay.
So, yeah, Atlanta has – we always hear about it, especially in Brian Kemp's 2 terms. Big for business, Georgia big for business. Technology has been a big hub in Atlanta, and connected car technology. There's a lab in Alpharetta called IATL that specializes in that. That's state of the art. You would never realize it was here. And back in August, late August, there was basically the international, or was it the Intelligent Traffic Systems World Conference, the World ITS Conference. Our Rachel Cox Rosa did a story from there. Was in Atlanta, the one for the whole world. All of the traffic nerds met. I hope they had a designated survivor somewhere in Topeka hanging out. But they were all hanging out here in Atlanta, and they picked Atlanta because of the Congress Center's proximity to MARTA and because of IDA-ATL and the other technology investments.
He's an encyclopedia when it comes to transportation. You make it so enjoyable to listen to. I appreciate you coming on.
Hey, it's always good to be on with you and Reams and Gabby, too.